We begin with the market movement then, and it certainly has been quite an interesting one, even today. So markets perhaps trying to find some territory in which they can climb, and unfortunately not to be. Record drops across most of the market as well, or should I say drops from record territory, particularly out in Asia and the United States. Also, Malaysia, the king there, also putting out a state of emergency. That state of emergency is set to last until the 1st of August, as they try to put in a few more measures in place to try and curb the spread of COVID-19 out on that side of the world too. So how's that impacted markets? Well, negativity, unfortunately, for the most part, although managing to tick higher was the Shanghai Composite, but it felt the pressure a little bit earlier on as it headed into some red, but managed to close higher, 2 2/10%. The Nikkei index pretty much flat, while the Hang Seng is 1 1/3% to the good there. As I said, some negativity out in the United States region as well. Negativity as well does persist in some parts of Europe. The FTSE 100 out in London is down 0.4%. That's 28 index points there. Marginal gains, almost flat really for the DAX out in Germany. Similar picture for the CAC 40, just in the opposite direction. Onto the local board. Well, yesterday we saw some positivity. Today we're slightly in the red, but really not too much to cry home about. I suppose we're looking for some direction. Where will that come from? Well, we'll chat to Chantal Marks in a minute or two and find out very quickly from her what her thoughts are. The industrials have gone down 0.2%. A lot of that based then on just the fall of some of the tech counters in Asia, affecting, of course, Naspers locally, which does mean that the index sort of does get a bit of a hit as well. Then today, checking in on some of the fallers as well. HCI, Imperial, ShopRite also going down today. Afrimat taking a more than 2% dip in today's picture also. Overall, though, still on the market front, financials have taken a 0.2% rise today, led by the banking counters, while gold and platinum miners also headed in some positive direction. So some green trading there, into the black they go. SA's listed property market also gaining 1.2%. One of the big gainers as well across the board today. In terms of green, the stocks that have gone higher today, the likes of Emira, Hyprop, certainly going to be helpful for those property stocks to go a little bit higher today. That's more than 6% gained there. Altron, Cartrack, very interestingly enough, across what happens there. Cartrack, as we said, leaving the Johannesburg Stock Exchange to have an inward listing at a later date, but will be trading on the NASDAQ, which will be quite significant for them, trying to enter that global capital market as well. So for now, headed a little bit higher there. Distel also going up 2 2/3%, with City Lodge also enjoying some green trading there. Onto the local currency. Well, we're doing a little bit better today, but is it enough to get us back below 15? No, it certainly isn't. We're at 15.44 rand against the US dollar. 2/3% stronger is the local currency today against the greenback. For a euro, well, that'll cost you 18.76 rand if you have it at present. Also, as you can see, some improvement on that front. The British pound is said to cost you just under 21 rand. In fact, earlier this morning, it was sitting above that 21 rand mark, and will get interesting from here on. A big, fairly sizable 4% gain today in the Bitcoin price. And I say fairly sizable because it's actually gone up more than that on some occasions, particularly in a day, more than 30% on some occasions as well, quite interestingly enough. Brent crude going up 1.5% now. And the question, I suppose, now is supply seemingly not really there in the market, but demand may begin to pick up. And if it does, it means that Brent crude oil is headed for $60 a barrel. We'll see if that certainly is the case. $1,860 a fine ounce for gold. Platinum's at $1,063 an ounce. Chantal Marks from FNB Wealth just joins us as well now. FNB Wealth and Investment helps us to unpack this market movement. Chantal, thank you so much. Happy New Year, and a good chat to you as well. Then thank you so much for joining us. Interestingly enough, the market last year didn't necessarily take COVID and just go down. It managed to pick up in the exact same year. So we can't really liken it to 2008, 2009, can we?
No, and I mean, I think that this really does illustrate that the bear market that we did experience in March was an event-driven bear market. I think what the market is struggling to come to terms with, and what it probably doesn't reflect fully just yet is that this specific event, which was COVID-19 or is COVID-19, has triggered a cyclical downturn, and it's also lasted a lot longer than what was initially anticipated. So the market continues to pick up, but there might still be a few challenges ahead, particularly if the second wave persists, and if we see a third and a fourth wave in, for example, Europe, and if the US doesn't come to grips with their numbers, which really still looks like a very prolonged and serious first wave.
Yeah, so even though we've taken a slight dip from the record territory mark, particularly out in the United States on Wall Street and somewhat as well out in Asia, record territory still seems to be the thing, particularly out this month as well. Markets still set to go a little bit higher, especially if the vaccines are something that really helps in curbing the spread of COVID-19.
Yes, there really are three reasons why markets continue to be exceptionally strong. So as you mentioned, vaccines, which means that because markets are forward-looking, they're already reflecting a normalization in economic activity in a few months or in a year's time. Another factor is the fact that you've got this massive stimulus coming from some of the larger developed market economies globally, in terms of them just placing money in consumers' hands and allowing those economies to continue growing. And then the final thing, of course, is record low interest rates. This is not only a situation in South Africa, but it's something that is really prevalent all across the world. And if you do have access to cheap capital, as a business, you have the opportunity to grow earnings ahead of growth rates that you would have seen in the event of interest rates being a lot higher.
Yeah. Okay, very quickly then, we also have the earnings story coming out of the United States. Of course, the likes of Citibank, JP Morgan, all the other big lenders are set to come out for their fourth quarter earnings season. Expectations there?
So, I mean, expectations for the US earnings season is actually quite measured. You'll probably continue to see a quarter-on-quarter improvement because, of course, these banks, for example, and many of these businesses had to take quite a bit of pain in the second quarter going into the third quarter as well. Whether or not they'll grow on a year-on-year basis, I think will be a little bit more tricky. So in certain instances, you'll continue to see year-on-year growth, particularly out of technology stocks when it comes to earnings. But for some of the kind of hardcore industrial stocks really exposed to the real economy as well as financials, it will be a little bit more difficult.
Yeah. How far does Tesla still have to go from here? I mean, it's very difficult to just see a stock that has climbed, 800% at this point? It's almost like the Naspers story of old, right? Where a stock just keeps on climbing when you just thought, okay, that's about enough. That probably won't be, that's probably just the limit, but it just keeps on going. How far do you think Tesla can go?
It's very difficult to say at this point because there's a lot of euphoria in that share price as well. But there's also the promise of something that could absolutely change the world and change the way that humans move around and that humans store energy, which I think is something that Tesla feels very seriously about. They view themselves as an energy storage company. And if you can revolutionize that, you can really change the way that people do things. If you're a first mover there, of course, you have first mover advantage. So a lot of fear and promise in that share price, but that could just as well not come to the full fruition, and in which in terms of what is now currently expected. I think the share looks quite expensive, but I think if you are a holder, it would be very, very difficult to sell, especially because that euphoria just seems to be continuing.
Yeah, and it seems that it gets bought on more and more euphoria. Kind of sounds like Bitcoin, if you ask me. But anyway, let's get into a little bit of local news as well then, Chantal. You have IO Technology in the news again. And I mean, I know it's not a big trader of any kind at this point in time. I mean, it was at 6 Rand on Friday. Monday, all of a sudden, 400% gain off just about 400 trades or so. Would you consider that a little bit weird if you had something of that nature?
Yeah, I would certainly consider it to be a bit of a red flag. And I think that the JSE has also considered it as a red flag. So they're actually investigating that specific move. It could also just be something as simple as fat fingers, which in trading terms means that you've just typed in the wrong price. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But certainly that looks a little bit strange to me, especially in a company that's been marred by a lot of question marks around what its aim is and what it's trying to achieve, and also where it got its initial funding from.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Very quickly, worried about the rand at all? I mean, where's this weakness coming from? We're now at 15 rand 40 odd against the US dollar. At some point, we were below 15 and we thought things were hunky-dory.
So I think there are a few reasons for that, but I think it's mostly technical and it's based on dollar strength. So if the dollar continues to strengthen, you'll continue to see rand weakness, but that is not our base case at the moment. It seems as if the correction in the dollar was more or less technical, and that all the things that are actually driving dollar weakness will probably remain at the forefront over the next few months at least. The rand should, over time, continue to strengthen to fair value levels. It's become a little bit too weak again, but it could, of course, trade at these levels for a while because it is still a sentiment-driven currency as a proxy for emerging market currencies.
Yeah. Could, should, would, maybe, might not. Oh boy, isn't that the state of the market? Chantal, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it. Again, Happy New Year. We'll certainly chat very soon as well. Have a good one. Thank you so much for joining us. Chantal Marks then from FNB Wealth and Investment.